Yeah, so I figured to bring you on here because you you stand out not just because of, like, the fact that you have, like, really good takes on geopolitics. You've actually been in the system when
Yes.
it comes to the
Yeah.
military, so you can give all the information to the military spurs, those that are obsessed with
Yeah.
logistics and all of that. You know how the sausage is made. So I figured I'd bring you on. So yeah, t give people a brief overview of your military experience and your background, then we could just start talking about Iran.
Sure. I was a grunt. I was assigned to a special. I went on when I deployed to Iraq and Kurdistan in 2001. Um, we were assigned to assist a special type of unit in the north east Kurdistan, and part of our assistance was defending their base. Because we were just grunts, right? We weren't special. We were just but because of the size of their base being small, they got to train. They trained us up on how to run a lot of counter drone systems because drones were a big threat even back then. In fact, the exact same models, the Shaheeds, Muhairs. There's new ones now, but the Shaheed drone has been in development for a long time, and we were user beta testing it, if you will, getting hit by like the
Huh.
prototypes. Um, so, and then just we also were trying. We had some, so how we had, early, actually not early, pretty jamming technology is actually quite developed. It's been around for a long time, but it was being miniaturized and deployed for drones. So, I have a lot of experience with drones. That was drones had by that time kind of replaced IEDs as the threat to soldiers in
Mm.
Iraq. This is very, late GWAT. So yes, and for I actually I don't know if I posted it, you saw every single base my boots touched the ground in when I was in Iraq has been hit by
Oh,
Iranian
snap.
drones. Yeah, I was thinking like I was like, oh yeah, no, that's Camp Buring. Okay, that's the specialty base. That's it. That's Erbil Air Force Base where I spent a lot of time too. Oh, that's was it Ali Salim in or no, was it Ali Salim or yeah, I think it was, the one in Kuwait. There's an air base in Kuwait. That's where I flew into. It's like every time, even if I was there only for a couple minutes, every place I've touched with my feet, got hit in this last war, which is kinda crazy to think about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, off the top of your head, how many bases does the US still have in the Middle East, and how many troops are based in the Middle American troops are based in the Middle East in areas that could potentially be hit by Iranian missile strikes?
Yeah. So CENTCOM is big. It's like Central Asian Command, I guess is what you would really call it.
Mhm.
The biggest so there is Kuwait is the big Camp Buring is the big, mostly army, base. That's in Kuwait, that's huge. Al Salim is the airfield, mostly Air Force, that's huge. The, Bahrain houses the entire 5th Fleet headquarters, like their home port of the 5th Fleet, and Qatar has, like CENTCOM higher command. They've actually been moving around where CENTCOM true like, everyone's known, even since, frankly, like, the late '80s, that if the Iranians wanted to shut down the Gulf or the Persian Gulf, they could, just because of the nature of how anti-ship missiles work. Once the
Mhm.
French made the Exocet and the, Chinese made the Silkworm anti-ship missiles, they were deployable from planes and they were relatively cheap, and they were also deployable from their ground-based variants, and they were once, somebody from the land can shoot extremely far from the sea, the Persian Gulf is very small, and, everyone kind of knew that specifically the Bahrain Fifth Fleet was kind of screwed, right? There's a reason, like, American planners have known that you have to basically give up the Gulf on the sea, at least in the beginning. Like, if you're gonna fight Iran, you can't contest the Gulf. And, that's why you see such a pullout of Iran. There's not enough of America from those bases. Like, there's the base has been evacuated. It's just getting plastered. It's being hit. There's not much air defense. There's a couple pack launchers, maybe, or something, maybe Avengers, who knows? But, maybe probably more than Stingers, but, it's just getting, like, there's not really air defense outside of, the air base in Kuwait. There's not much air defense in this whole show. It's been bringing a lot of drones just getting through. A lot of these, Shaheed suicide drones just sailing through air defense. You know, it
Alright, let's just do a broad overview
Yeah,
so far because there's obviously a lot of fog of war and events
yeah.
changing on the ground. What have, like, Israel and the United States, like, struck in Iran, and what has Iran struck in retaliation? Just give, like, an overview of what's
Yeah,
happened
so
since February 28th.
oh, sure. So the first wave of strikes was during, of course, during peace talks, as is the Israeli preference. Um, there was a wave of assassination strikes were launched against Iranian figures, including the Ayatollah. One seems to have gone off track. It also killed hit a girls' school and killed about 118 women and children. Which was people can make what they will in terms of targeting and that. But anyway, so there was initial assassination strike, and then strikes on Iranian. Call them. Been a mix. The American strike's been a mix of like what you would call regime strong points, like police stations and militia headquarters and IRGC sites. They've been, of course, they've been trying to target. They have targeted some air defense radar arrays. Um, they've gotten 2 missile launchers, but the problem is the Iranians are everything is mobile, everything is moving pretty much constantly. Like they know they have to stay on the move. And while American intelligence is great, right? They have been the satellite imagery isn't going to tell you like it's not actually up to the minute, right? Or not enough that you can strike a call if a car's going down a highway or a vehicle, you have to know where something is to hit it. It's always been the kind of the issue with it was enough targets. America had this problem in Yemen too. They've trouble getting like targets. What they really want to hit is the missile launchers and the air defense launchers and the air defense mobile radars. But they are hitting all the stationary things. They have all the Iranian surface navy. They do have like some frigates in a. It's mostly for like peacetime purposes. Obviously, they don't really factor into war planning. They've struck those. Um, but a lot of the Iranian assets are they're either deep underground or they're relatively small. Like the Republican Guard has owned their own navy separate from the Iranian Navy, which has like its kind of ship missile carrying speedboats. Those are impossible to kill. All of them are pretty widely distributed. The a lot of the missile launchers and missile stocks are deep in mountains underground. But they've been targeting what they can in that respect. They also targeted some of the nuclear sites, target or nuclear research sites that are alleged in Isfahan. They targeted Homs, which is like kind of the holy city, kind of the Vatican of the Shia Islam is Homs, not Tehran, even though Tehran's like the political center. They've done damage. Absolutely, they're bombing a lot of targets in Tehran. They bombed the presidential palace. They possibly tried to kill the president. They did kill the spring leader. They tried to kill the former president Ahmadinejad, who is kind of known as a kind of radical, the kind of a person, which they didn't kill him. He's announced he's alive, but his house was targeted, and it does seem that were hoping maybe trying to make sure he wouldn't be involved in any kind of new government. The problem is the Iranians have been able to strike back because about 4 days prior, they kind of did kind of a Soviet, what do you call, like a dead hand, where they they decentralized first. They just decentralized military command from civilian command, right? They put an IRG general in charge of the military response broadly to any conflict. So they actually cut out civilian leadership from the kind of from the loop in terms of like military response if they were attacked. And then he um, gave basically regional or like kind of brigade level commanders in the missile and air defense system and drone forces. He gave them basically like striking authority, so they can strike when they want to strike. So they're not having to pass things all the way up to the chain of command, which I think has contributed to how much they've been firing, right? Because I think looking at the 12-day war, it was very much Iranian attacks were very much informed by politics and negotiations, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to send this many waves at this many thing. We'll see what the result is in this many waves." This has been instead of being like waves and then looking at it and responses and kind of a tit for tat. This has just been constant firing from the Iranians. They're not. The regions are clearly not coordinating, and it seems they don't need to, um, because there are some regions who have enough launchers, 15 to 30 launchers enough to get through even Israeli air defense. So they're getting through consistently, which is new, and they've really clobbered in Bahrain Fifth Fleet headquarters. Fifth Fleet is getting. I mean, I saw what looked like a maritime fuel dump get hit and go up big. They hit so many targets. They started targeting hotels where they suspect because the Americans evacuated the base and put them in hotels in Bahrain. The Iranians had enough, in the tank. But okay, well now we're going to start swinging the personnel. So that presumably says they've done a lot of damage. They've also had American radar arrays. Most American ships, the American ships are long in the deep in the Gulf. But they the and like, the American assets are being hit in the Gulf outside of Kuwait pretty hard. Now they've evacuated most of these sites, but I mean, it seems like every hour or two there's a new explosion at Fifth Fleet headquarters, which is crazy because you have to think of America as a naval power. If you're already if your first move of your thing is like giving up the headquarters of your navy in the region, well, what does that look like for your naval dominance?
Yeah. So here's some interesting comments in the chat,
Oh, sure.
and Zach said this: "Shocking that the IRGC couldn't protect the supreme leader, who's a Iran fully infiltrated." What are your
No,
thoughts about that?
I profoundly object to that. Um, the supreme leader was not so in the 12-Day War and in previous conflicts. The supreme leader has been quickly kind of spirited away. So it's like he didn't appear at all in the first 12 days of the 12-Day War. He didn't really make any public appearances at all. Um, he was quickly spirited away. He was killed at his house, and one of the Iranian that was I can't remember which he was some kind of security chief. He was asked why did they didn't, and they said that the Ayatollah said he didn't want to do that this time. That he was effectively willing to. The fact that he was killed in his home, right? It wasn't as if he was betrayed by an informant, right? The man was at his office in his house. It's kind of listen, like I may have enemies, right? But if someone comes and like at my house and shoots me, my enemies did that, not my friend. My friends didn't betray me and say, "Hey, he'd be at his house," right? It's a I do think the Ayatollah was really, frankly, there's religious reasons. I think that he was willing to accept martyrdom, and also frankly, the Ayatollah gave a relatively famous speech in I think '89 where he talked about like how much he didn't like being the Ayatollah and how much he would have preferred to die in combat. He's a bit of a veteran of the Iran-Iraq War, famously wounded, et cetera.
Mhm.
And then there was another one where more recently when there's a child they're at some kind of religious event. The child walks to it and says, "Hey, Ayatollah, I want to be a martyr," because it's a martyrdom culture. The Shia Islam is very, very similar to early Christianity, and it's focused on martyrdom, and that big time will go to heaven. It's extremely, I mean, eschatologically, it's very similar and similar like end times views. It's very interesting, for if you're an anthropologist, right? But the child says, "Oh, I want to be a martyr," and the Ayatollah says, "Okay, son, what if instead of being a martyr now, because you're 7 years old, you go to college and you become a scientist and you pray a lot and do a lot of work for Islam and you get married, have a bunch of kids, and then when you're 80 or 90 years old, then you can get martyred." And he was kind of describing this like in Shia life, this kind of perfect life, which is to contribute to the cause, have a lot of kids, be educated, and then at the very end, if you get lucky, you can get martyred. And he did achieve that. Like it's hard to think of a figure in modern religious history who more mirrored the lifestyle he advocated. He had something like he had more than like 7 children. He had a ton of kids. I mean, very tragically, he was killed with his granddaughter and one of his daughters and son-in-law, I believe. But I don't I do not see the Ayatollah's death as a failure of the IWC. Also, I do think that he is an old man who beat cancer twice, who has always been like people don't realize he's been he's disabled. Like he was wounded very heavily in the Iran-Iraq War. He's not like an 86-year-old person is one thing, but someone who's like had cancer twice and has always had like trouble walking mobility. It's very believable to me that this kind of guy would want to go. Okay, actually, I want to. I mean, he's effectively the Pope, right? It's like if the Pope was assassinated, you wouldn't be like the Pope. It was if the Pope killed in Vatican City, you'd be like, oh, the Pope was betrayed. The Pope lives in Vatican City, and he maybe didn't want to run. I think it's very convincing that he didn't want to run, and I think it's more admirable. Like it's there's something more admirable, like not running to the bunker, right? It's just kind of facing it head on.
Yeah,
Uh,
didn't that Yahoo go to Germany or something or like that? Like,
well, his plane did. It's being
yeah,
alleged he's there. But
yeah.
one last thing I just want to point out is it was in many ways like a final debate, and Khomeini has always been a guy who wanted to negotiate with the West. There are hardliners who would say no, don't negotiate. And there's like the reformers who kind of want to give more, and there may have been a debate internally of saying, people were saying, "Hey, Ayatollah, these people are hostile. We can see they're looking to strike us. They're going to try to kill you." And he may have been saying either he's like, "Listen, I'm going to stay here because either they're not going to kill me, in which case they could show that they're showing we can negotiate still. There's still some kind of middle ground in moderation here, and I want to be there for that, right?" or you guys are right, the hardline's right, and they'll kill me, and then I'm at the end of my life anyway, and then you guys can go as hard as you want. You have all just there will be no limits to the response, right? And there are no limits. I think that's also one of the reasons I think it's been so. I mean, it's not as an analyst, it's not possible to track this war in waves. If you remember the 12-Day War, we'd all be on Twitter or talking in the group chats like, "Oh, look, oh, this country's firing a wave of whatever. It's firing a wave of whatever." It's like, "Oh, a new wave every 4 hours every night, whatever. There'll be or
Mhm.
3 hours be the new wave." This time it's just been a constant stream of you know Bahrain, Qatar, Cyprus, Tel Aviv. The UAE was getting it. Riyadh in Saudi Arabia was getting it. They're attacking Americans places all over. They're attacking Israel proper constantly. There's no um, tit for tat. This is effectively Iran on a war footing, which I think also strangely, frankly, seems to have surprised the Americans. The Americans did not seem to expect this level of response, which is crazy if they were assassinating the leader of the country, right? Um,
Yeah.
it's very possible that the Maduro thing made them overconfident.
Yes, I think they are on a type of gambler's high from, like, Syria to Venezuela, and they thought they could, like, do that, but, it's just different because Latin
Yeah,
America, the US has escalatory dominance there, and they
yeah.
also very likely they probably got some people bribed there, and, that's gonna
But
come out soon.
even that, like, they didn't shoot Maduro in the head, right? If
Yeah,
they had killed Maduro in front of the whole world, like, you may have actually had this, like, the regime would have to maintain legitimacy, like, start shooting at people, right? Or shoot at least do some kind of pro forma firing back, right? This is like Maduro isn't dead. There's gonna be a court case, the whole thing. It's like he's gonna hit the grandstand, like there's like I don't think they comprehended that like it's crazy to say this, like murder is wrong, right? And societies tend to like react to murder in a different way. Like kidnapping is still inherently political, right? Even though they kill people to do it.
yeah.
Like it's a political act, not a I don't want to say it's not an act of it's an act of war, but you know what I mean. There's a bit of a divide of is the like
Well, that's the thing, you have to look at, like, war as an extension of the politics, that's the
yes.
problem with people that they don't really understand. Like, that's one thing I like about the Ukraine war that's shown, where the Russians, they use their gains or whatever developments they are able to make on the battlefield as ways to gain diplomatic leverage. That's
Yeah,
the thing that a lot of people don't get. Whereas, like the Judeo West, they use the diplomacy as a way to buy time on the battlefield or pull
yeah,
off some
yeah.
weird Talmudic style
Mhm.
assassinations. But, anyways, this actually pivots to my next point. Pete Budapest asked in the chat, do Russia and China have any cards to play here with regards to the Iran conflict?
Ch I would not the Chinese have a card, but they're already playing it. The Chinese are publishing, battle damage estimates of BDA, it's a fancy military word for they're publishing where the missiles hit, right? So American bases are getting struck, and the Chinese are just publishing it openly. Probably saying it's Iran too, but maybe they're setting a higher grade, but Chinese are clearly, like, making it impossible with the Amer so it's a big deal to know how effective your strikes are, how accurate they are, right, for a military, and
Mhm.
the Chinese are just giving that information from their satellites to the public even, not just their aid, and, like, which also has a moralizing effect on the cause and support against, you know, people against the war in America and the greater Western empire, and so that's the card that China's really playing here. That, the Russians played a card earlier, like, I would say they don't have any cards in their hand, but they've played their cards already, right? So the Russians gave, um, Iran they signed a deal, which was very interesting. It was like, "Over the next 3 years, starting next year, we're gonna give you this many thousand, Man-Pad," which is shoulder-fired missile launchers, and when I saw that, I was like, "They probably just sent them all right." They sent at least a few now, right?
Mhm.
So the Russians have given them Man-Pads, and they're definitely being used or something's being used because I've counted 9 between 5 and 9 American or Israeli Hermes or Predator drones have been down in this conflict, which also more than were confirmed in the 12-Day War. 12-Day War had about, I think, maybe 3 that were downed. So the Chinese also have played the card. They played this card in the late '80s, which was to give Iran Silkworm anti-ship missiles, and then later generations. Like the Iranians have always been, in fact, like, an ancillary part of the Chinese anti-ship missile industrial complex.
Yes,
So
yes. I read something, a declassified thing, that it was, like, Pakistan as well that,
Yes.
supplied them that in the
Iran,
Iran,
Iraq war,
Iraq
yes.
war. Yeah, like, towards the end because Pakistan has a very interesting relation with Iran, the research I've done, that they were one of the first countries to recognize the Islamic Republic, and then they provided some assistance towards the end of the war. And there is an interesting in that BRICS, that whole Belt and Road Initiative. There's an interesting like triumvirate there of China, Pakistan,
Mhm.
and Iran. This
Yes.
economic network.
And Pakistan and Iran have they've both been very much involved in because they are China is, very conflict averse, extremely conflict averse, right?
Mhm.
But they are not like military spending averse and military industrial averse, right? So they do have Pakistan who gets in a lot of scuffles, and Iran gets in a lot of scuffles, and they have kind of tied in. Not I would not go so far as to say they're because they're not just field testing system. Like the Iranians are developing variants of Chinese systems, like Iranian missile ballistics, anti-ship ballistic missile, anti-ship missile systems are like they're developments of the Chinese systems generally, right? Um, and a lot of the Pakistan stuff, a lot of the aircraft are just either fully Chinese or you know they are kind of a part of like the research complex in the same way that, for instance, a lot of the F-35 parts are designed by BAE, which is the British aeronautics company, right? Like countries will kind of co-develop in their kind of research industrial complex, and the Chinese are always been a part of that. The Iranians and the Russians not so much, not historically. A lot of that's very new, where the Russians are just sending them wholesale systems, right? Allegedly S-400s, some fighters, some obviously shoulder fired man pads, but they're not quite in like that research cabal that Pakistan and Iran and China are in.
Mm. Now, in terms of so there's a funny comment here that
Yeah.
had me rolling a bit from Right GEG. He said prison gangs have better supply chains than what the US has now in the Middle East. What is the supply chain situation like in
So that's a good question, right? Because
Yeah.
they've been sending in a lot of they call it like the Sky Train, a lot of C-17s going to kind of they go up. It's cool. It's a very cool ride to watch on like a. It's
Mhm.
you know it's good because of how the Earth is shaped. You learn about the Earth isn't flat when you watch these Sky Trains. They kind of almost kiss Antarctica on the way up. It's actually shorter. It's a point to point shorter to the Middle East if you go higher. Because the how globes work. But they call it the Sky Train. It's been a ton of C-17s, and the the issue is that it's not supply chain, I don't think. I think it is supply side. It's that the factories can't create enough of these high-end missiles fast enough, right? There's something we make a lot of, right? We made a lot of JDAMs, but those are very short range, right? To fire a JDAM, even a glide extended range JMER, which is extended range, you've got to get pretty darn close. And by close, I mean it's like 40 kilometers or whatever. That's in air, air to ground to air missile range. Um, a lot of these like standoff, hyper specialized, super long range systems. Um, we have a lot of them, and I think all of them, when as soon as they're built or they're getting from their depot or the factory to CENTCOM relatively quickly, these things you're building a handful of months. Same with like ground-based interceptors. I think it's now. I will say though, compared to what a true expeditionary military force does, because things have kind of degraded the Navy. I saw it. So the SkyTrain's been going for almost 2 weeks now, which is a ton of C-17s every day there and back. And it's not just that, but like it's basically almost more, and like the European NATO airlift is also involved. Tons of planes. But someone I saw, I forget who it was. Somebody did the math on all the plane trips, and they said it would have been the equivalent to a quarter of a single boat trip. So they're prioritizing speed. Also, like how integrated the merchant fleet is with the U.S. Navy is maybe questionable, and or how reliable it is. Like if because what if something happens on those boats and you can't get there, you're fucked. So I don't think it's the split lines that are bad. They can now they're probably sketchy. It's quite sketchy to fly a C-17 into actually. Well, I say that now it's very sketchy to fly a C-17 into Kuwait. Right? Did not used to be until this kicked off. But it's not so much the supply line to me. There's still we got a lot of aircraft flying still. It's the choice to do it all by air and it's clearly a like factory side, not so much supply line side. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now there's been a little squabble in the chat here, and
I
I
know.
this
I
one is
cannot see the chat. This is fun.
yeah, but no, it's actually good because it does answer an interesting question that people have been speculating about, and this is from Shango. Okay, let's get this question out of the way. Trump won't be the president before the end of the year. What do you guys think?
See, I hate these questions because you're clearly going to place a bet on Polymarket,
Yeah.
Kalshi, right after answers,
Yeah.
and you're gonna blame me if I'm wrong. No, I mean, I don't I think Trump's in till till the end of the year, for sure, barring a kind of a health crisis. I see no reason that he's going to like, this could go so like, imagine, if you will, like, the end game worst case scenario, right? Which is, like, this drags on for, like, 3 weeks, we deplete all our standoff munitions, that's super long range stuff, we switch to glide bombs, and, like, I don't know, a whole wing of F-35s gets just schwacked in the air, right? And the
Mhm,
Iranians capture 6 pilots. Like, the
mhm.
absolute worst case scenario for America, right? And also, like, a general and an admiral in a CENTCOM command gets killed, and, like, an Israeli minister of whatever gets killed. Like, imagine, like, the most bull Iranian case you can, right? The most total Iranian victory, right?
Mhm.
Trump's not resigning over that. He's not gonna get impeached. Like, the Democrats are supporting this war. Like, outside of very few, like Thomas Massie and, was it Rokan or, uh,
Yeah,
the Democratic Party is behind him. There's not, like, it would be very difficult to, like, the Afghanistan withdrawal went about as bad as it could for Joe Biden, right? Like,
yeah,
a bunch of Marines died, a bunch of civilians died, gave all the Taliban. We lost, like, C-RAMs, actually, which are a very important part of counter drone warfare. They're low range, but they're really good at shooting on drones. We lost a majority of the C-RAMs in inventory in Afghanistan pullout. They're miniguns with they're miniguns that are huge that shoot down missiles and drones and mortars. They're really very very advanced piece of tech. We lost a major. We had, I believe, kind of spitballing numbers. I believe we had like 28 in inventory, and we lost like 17 in Afghanistan. And the pullout it happened so quick. Um, and of course all those Marines died, and the whole like loss of international prestige. Joe Biden didn't resign though. Presidents, frankly, I don't think presidents ever resigned over a foreign policy or been impeached over a foreign policy mistake. Even during like the peak of Iran Contra, Reagan never like considered resigning. Presidents are given wide latitude in foreign policy because it is a uniparty. So Trump,
yeah.
so get your callous. I'm putting it. You can blame me if you're wrong. Trump will be the president in January 1st, 2027. Blame me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I agree with the Democrat opposition thing that it's pretty much non-existent, and it's honestly always like the typical format. Well, they'll say like Ali Khamenei, insert X leader is bad, blah blah blah. But the way this was executed was it done in a reckless fashion, or it was done in an unconstitutional manner.
Oh,
That's a public statement, but like
but that's a
they,
very
they
even I would say that's a very the most liberal. That's an AOC statement. The party, the mainstream of your moderates, your Chuck Schumers, they were saying that we should have gone. Like Chuck Schumer was saying things like, "What's Trump waiting for? We should go in now." Like there were parts of the Democratic Party that were like swinging for the fences on this or fully endorsed. Like Fetterman said, full endorsement for like the Trump. Like the Democratic Party is a much more quote unquote right wing intervention, like right wing. You know, I don't like doing left wing right wing in American politics. It's a dead letter. But they are an interventionist party. The Democratic Party does not even frankly, since Obama has not really pretended to be an interventionist. Famously, when Trump bombed Syria, the Democrats are all behind him. They were called it very presidential. They were so proud. Even though it was peak anti-Trump, the Democratic Party is an interventionist party. I don't. They would have a very weak leg to stand on trying to impeach over even a bad war. Oh, you lost a war or you lost a
yeah,
military operation.
that's not the hill they're gonna die on there.
Yeah,
No, foreign policy, I agree. That shit is just pure uni-party stuff. It's,
yeah.
more likely that yeah, like, some type of humiliating thing like that you mentioned, or some, like, Epstein dump combined with, like, some other releases of, like, corruption charges once, like, organized jewelry is done with Trump, like, in his lame duck phase, they might dump him, but I think he's probably there to stay because he is a Judeo-accelerationist
Yeah.
president. Like, he has gone way above and beyond even most neocons when it comes to, like, say, like, assassinating Soleimani, striking Iran, all that. Like, he's broken so many
Yeah.
taboos,
Yeah.
Abraham Accords.
This actually is like a thing where I don't obviously the calling somebody a neocon when they're supporting the war is it's going to like always hit a little bit and burn people, but it's almost it is a different thing like the Dunroe doctrine because the neoconservatives were ha- they had a much more pessimistic view of American power in a lot of ways where when they saw like oh you need to change you have to put boots in the ground. Max Boot famously wrote the Saboteurs of Peace was arguing that basically the neocons were the boots on the ground guys because they understood that the nature of this, the point of what they were doing was to enact political change for the interest of the United States and Israel, right? But the best way to do that is to put boots on the ground because boots, as a former boot on the ground, um, boots on the ground are the way you do things and change things, have influence on areas, right? The Dunroe doctrine seems to be based on like achieving tactical victories in a way, right? Like getting a W. But like the underlying facts on the ground are still very questionable. Like even if you would giving you like the absolute best case, which is like the new president of Venezuela is totally a creature, like the new president of Venezuela is totally a CIA asset. They still have no leverage on her, right? Like she could do whatever she wants, right? Like America has to deal with the reality of Venezuela versus in Iraq and they were shaping the reality on the ground. The Trump, but the Trump thing is more like getting a W, getting a win, and you know the political objective is almost secondary to like the internal political you know machinations. Reminds me a little bit of the 2003 elections, which were not a neocon thing. So there's a split in the Bush administration, like your true blue neocons, your Boltons, Cheneys, whatever's, and your compassionate conservatives who were still that like interventionists, yes, but like a different ideological history, right? The compassionate conservative wing really pushed because they were very focused on the elections, the uh the Iraqi elections with like the purple fingers, all that shit. And we really pushed those elections really hard. And we installed a bunch of frankly like, Iranian government agents because we did free and fair elections, right? And we'd okay, well, wow, it turns out all these Shia, they sure love Shia guys, and wow, Iran's really Shia, so like kind of bit us in the ass, right? And it kind of reminds me of that, like it's you're doing things for like domestic consumption that look on the surface to be like a tactical win or a win for the occupation or a win for the United States, but they're going to like not just blowback. You're going to have, um, dude, this is like clearly gonna the bad things will happen as a result of this, right? Like there are unforeseen circumstances that are coming. Very. This reminds me a lot. Do you remember the guy who killed Saddam Hussein, the Iranian prime minister, or sorry, Iraq prime minister? What's his name? I'm forgetting. It was like one of these Ali guys. Is killing me. I feel like
Yeah,
it's killing me.
I forget. Yeah.
His name was Ali. Anyway, he's the guy who was basically like the prime minister. He signed Saddam's death warrant before they hung him. He is still in Iranian politics. He's a Shia guy. So he's the guy that won that election. Currently, he is the head of a coalition list in Iraqi parliamentary elections, and the Americans said they would not they would sanction Iraq if he won. Right? They have this guy is so clearly a pro-Iranian guy that like America will not accept his victory in an election, and we started swinging our weight around the State Department, trying to get other people to get somebody else to head that list and sabotage this guy. But he is like the polls, the kind of the choice of these people. You don't want to do like, and that's what you don't want to do these like cheap wins for consumption. They bite you in the ass. You empower figures who oppose you for 2 decades now. This guy has been a thorn in the American side because he's pro-Iran, and just because of religious reasons. Now his parties are probably somewhat annoyed that America killed the Pope of his religion. That guy's not going anywhere. How many of these things are we not seeing? For instance, in Bahrain, Bahrain is historically part of Iran, actually, island of the Persian Gulf. It was given up in the kind of decolonial period, and they're kind of shaking things out when they were making, new countries and stuff. Right,
Mhm.
became independent. It's controlled by a Sunni American aligned. Obviously, they have a giant military. It's a tiny island. A lot of the island is like Fifth Fleet headquarters, but it's a minority of Sunnis and a majority of Shia. And the Sunnis are the ruling class, and the Shia are kind of the middle class. And now even they have like a kind of a slave imported Southeast Asian like guest worker class too. That the reason the Bahraini government and monarchy have power is because like they are perceived to have American backing. The Americans are gone. Their base is getting plastered. The Bahraini government has no native air defense, nothing. They're in their palace like freaking out, probably underground. I'm not saying that there will be a Shia uprising to put a Shia government or an Iranian government in Bahrain tomorrow, but I'm saying people in Bahrain who are Shia, who are filming videos of themselves watching drones hit the American base and yelling "Ya Ali," which is a Shia like war chant. Those guys are going to become more a factor in politics in the next 3 to 10 years. Like for sure, there will be some kind of a Shia movement because they said, "Oh wow, if Iran stands up, the Americans have to actually leave our island." So Iranian leverage could be gone and could be present in Bahrain in the future. Like there's going to be knock on effects of this kind of tactical thinking.
I see. Now, I wanted to also have this question addressed here. This is from Pete Budapest, where he asked, could you elaborate on the US stockpile? How long could they conceivably keep this affair going?
It's a very good question. So no one, it's a big question, right? You can do a lot of math over like reported expenditures that the war. We do know because of it's like publicly available because of like stock prices and DD contracts and stuff and you know uh, stockholder meetings that a lot of these interceptors are being produced, which are anti-air interceptors. We know they've been being used like crazy in Ukraine and a lot of it is 12-day war. But you are kind of going on vibes to some degree. Like you are kind of just kind of getting a feel. So my feel of this, because they're not publishing their stockpile size, is that, and I'll tell you what I'm basing this off. Right, I'm not just gonna is that there's two relevant stockpiles here. The first relevant stockpile is long range standoff munitions. I think when the president said it would be the goal was a 4-day conflict that could be pushed longer. Right. I think if we were going, so there's including the Israelis, there's about 800 aircraft in this mission, assuming a good chunk of those are fighters. So more, about say half. If there's 400 fighters and they were launching sorties constantly, I do think that would basically burn everything in 4 days. But they're clearly rationing it. Like the Iranians are going, 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 and the Americans are coming in waves of 30 strikes or whatever, every few hours, very very like kind of periodically. So they're rationing. They're not burning as fast as they can. I think what we have to go on for that is how to say this. I think 4 days at, like, maximum burn rate, which they're clearly not doing, right? And then maybe 2 weeks at the current rate, and then they'll just switch to glide bombs or other things, or maybe getting a little closer with stealth fighters and launching gravity bombs. I think 2 weeks in terms of these they're, like, standoff engines at the current use rate, probably always gonna have some Tomahawks there. Tomahawk missiles are very kind of low and slow. Like, probably always have a couple of those. We make a lot of those. We have a large stockpile. We don't use them as heavily as, you know but in the 12-day war, these really burned a lot of standoff munitions too, so it's very questionable 'cause I consider the kind of Jewish American Empire's military stockpile to do one thing, right? Because
Yeah, agreed.
all the gears are
Yes,
interchangeable. It's all made by the same factory. Like, it's made in the same.
it's all one thing.
It's all one thing. Um, the other question that is more interesting to me, so I think I 2 weeks, you'll see the cracks start to show with standoff munitions, which will require getting closer, using more like predator drones that will be lost, but they can actually go and use short range stuff because they can actually get into airspace. What's more interesting to me is the interceptors. Interceptor
Hmm.
missiles for THAADs and Patriots and arrows, David's arrow, David's sling, yeah. Um, and also the fighter. So I do think the reason there's so many fighters in the Persian Gulf right now is not actually to do a massive strike wave, it seems, maybe they were trying to that maybe they were there. Maybe that initial wave was bigger than it looked, and there was a big wave for the first day or the first few hours. But I think a lot of the reason, especially like the F-22s, which are they can do strike stuff, but they're air support fighters, is that they are trying to intercept as many of these drones and missiles with aircraft as possible, right? Because we have a lot of air-to-air missiles. They're much air-to-air missiles are much lighter. There's a lot. They're less technically. There's stuff that they're not technically advanced, but they're just cheaper. They're smaller. You can crank them out. Got a massive stockpile. We haven't had any air-to-air. There isn't a big dogfight war since I can't even think of like Vietnam, maybe like got a big stockpile of this from all eras. So I think they're attempting to lean on air-based air defense over land-based air defense. I think based on how much they're firing and how much we know how fast they can build, we could see at the 2-3 week mark total air missile tapped out. Um, that's not going to cause no more missiles to be fired by no means, but we're going to see they'll have to crack open stock like reserve stocks in the United States, stop giving any more Ukraine. You might see. So, for instance, we've seen this. America has kind of I don't know how they're aligning it's weird, but like France and Britain and maybe Germany are saying that the Gulf countries have some defense agreements with them, so those countries might get involved, and they could maybe send their air defensive stocks, which are also very low because a lot of them go to Ukraine. Like I think at 2-3 weeks we would start seeing like word getting out of external stocks being cracked, and also this frankly now at this point now the interception rate is they're clearly rationing them, right? The Bahrain airfield and they're getting a couple interceptors. They're not getting nearly what they need. Like Bahrain's getting plastered. It's wild. So I think they're already rationing standoff munitions and they're already rationing air defense interceptors from like ground based. So I think you can last 2-3 weeks but that's because they're rationing. They're already being the colors that where they're going to take some hits. Like Tel Aviv's getting hit. Ashkelon's getting hit. The Haifa refinery got hit. Like these places are getting hit. So, and they're getting hit with smaller waves and slower, less fatigued missions than they were in the 12-day war. So I think it's very indicative that they were already on a rationing program for these systems.
All right. I'm going to combine these two questions from two people, Ryan GGG and Pete Budapest, into like one. How long do you think this conflict will go, and what are the chances that the Iranian regime outlasts the U.S. stockpile that's being used?
I think it's very high. I think this, yeah, like you can't. This is a known. I mean, this is it's almost. It is one of those things. It's kind of a truism or a kind of word of God. Everyone says it's true, but it is. That's because it is true. Like there's no actual hard data, but you can't change a government from the air, right? You can't bomb a country and change its government. It's never. It didn't work in the Korean War, right? Like North Korea got bombed by something like I think the most bombs per square inch of like on until Gaza. Like you cannot bomb a country and change its government. You need to put boots to ground and have them march from the capital, or you can have to back some kind of rebel faction. The Iranian government is increasingly popular, increasingly strong internally. I mean, like they have like this guy. I want to put. Imagine if like the president of. It's even hard to think of a metaphor that makes sense. But like, imagine if when Vladimir Putin was elected, right?
Yeah.
He said that, I'm going to do things that people might not like. I'm going to run the country with it. The reason I'm doing it is because I know in my heart and my soul, like the American empire is going to kill me. Is going to have me killed and just try to destroy the country. And then 20 years later, the American empire killed him and tried to destroy the country. Like that's going to in 1989. Khomeini called this shot like it's. I mean, all governments are kind of held onto a certain mythos, right? And the mythos of the Iranian government has been fully vindicated. Like they basically said we exist for this kind of a situation. We are currently in that situation. I mean, it's hard to think of a more legitimizing thing for like for a regime to do it. It's like if, you know, if aliens invaded and the only way to stop them was like free speech and the Second Amendment, right? That's not going to like destroy the American government, right? Like,
Yeah.
private gun ownership was the only way to destroy the aliens. The Americans look really smart, right? Like the Americans, oh, the aliens only privately owned guns can hurt the aliens. The American government would clearly look like geniuses, and the rest of the world would look stupid. This is kind of how the Iranians are. The Iranians like, listen, like Israel is going to drag us into a war to destroy our religion and our government, and wow, and they're going to kill me, and then that happened. Like, I think that the regime is very strong. Like, it's and how long will this last? Like I said, I think the cracks begin to show at 2-3 weeks. Um, Also, the Iranians have kept this. Well, it may have changed now. When the war started, the Iranians said that they would accept a unconditional ceasefire. That may have changed because they with the Ayatollah being dead. But I think you see last ceasefire was pretty much unconditional in 12-day war. I think you at that 28-day, 30-day mark, I would be really surprised if the Americans and the Israelis are still gung ho about this and want to keep going. Um,
Mm.
Unless they've achieved the problem is in the 12-day war, they gave the Iranians a dress rehearsal and they didn't bring anything new to this point, right? Like the Iranians already fought a version of this war. They adjusted their strategy to do a better job. They're currently doing a better job. I also think the Iranian stockpiles are massive. Missiles and like the drones and missiles are very cheap. They're cranked out. Government factories, underground. They're probably all their underground factories still cranking out new ones. Um, I think the Iranians can keep this up for a long time. And also, right now, the Iranian air defense is not really deployed heavily. They're deployed. They have manpads deployed to kill enemy drones, but like the big air systems, I don't think they've been deployed yet. Even there's some of the radars have been stationary radars have been hit, but like because they do have. I think they're very comfortable absorbing the current amount of hits. I think they're very comfortable. Like, I mean, if you think about the American news, right? How many like local police precincts would you have to bomb before the American government fell? Like all of them, right? Like doesn't really fucking matter. Like you try to go, does bombing the Tehran, the eighth precincts of the Tehran police matter in a war to destroy like the enemy government entirely? And I think the regime outlasts this. It's hard to see what the American in the Clausewitzian terms what the Americans are trying to do. I've seen like the dumber kind of like I don't call them neocon like the American imperialist types being like, well, the plan is they're going to keep appointing interim supreme leaders, and we're going to keep killing them until we get a supreme leader who's cool with that. And like that's kind of like saying I'm going to kill Catholic cardinals until one of them like is Muslim. Like it's not every Catholic cardinal that's going to pop up is going to be Catholic. Like like it's kind of inherent to the job. In Clausewitzian terms, like what's the political goal? It's a bit murky. Um,
Yeah.
and the thing is, even if they destroy, like you could destroy every oil field, every refinery, you could just make Iran incapable of producing any more oil for the next 5 years. Problem is, the Iranians can do that to the Gulf states, and the Gulf states are much more vulnerable economically to that. Like I believe it, the Iranian economy runs on oil. Like don't get me wrong, but the Gulf states economies are just oil, right? Like Iran has like industrial. They have agriculture, right? Iran's not a desert. They have agriculture. They can feed themselves, right? They're not going to collapse. When the Gulf countries start doing their internal bickering, like they cut like the Gulf states all cut off Qatar at one point from overland transport, so they couldn't bring in food from the other Gulf states. And the Iranians actually broke that blockade and used ships to send like food because Iran produces food. Like there's nothing you can do to the Iranians that they can't do to somebody else so much harder, right? Outside of assassinations, right? The Iranians that can't quite run an assassination game the way the Israelis and the Americans can, but very difficult for you to imagine. It's hard to see why Trump wouldn't at some point, even before like the crack's going to show. It would make more sense to do it before. It's just okay. We'll take a unilateral ceasefire. and then it's kind of on the Iran. We'll take a unconditional ceasefire, and then it's kind of on the Iranians to say yes or no. And obviously, if it's in the Iranians' court to say yes or no to a ceasefire, then well, obviously the regime is safe, right? Then the stability of the regime is, if it's being threatened, they would just take the ceasefire. So I think the Iranian regime will come out on top. Also, the Dun Road doctrine is not about toppling regimes. Um, you see, the old neocons are saying like replace the regime. Trump is not saying replace the regime so much. You're not. They're not really do like it, they make references to like Pahlavi and stuff and like democracy, but I don't see like a declared regime. Like they, in fact, they don't want to use the word regime change because it has bad associations historically. So that's my view on those two questions. I'm sorry. I'm sure the chat. I wish you could see the chat, but this is a weird platform. So
Yeah, but, so I see a good deal of geopolitical strategists out here, armchair types
just like me.
that think they're all slick with their novelty takes and stuff, saying that Trump is just trying to kill off all the IRGC people so that they can supposedly have like the rest of the Iranian army that's in place that is supposedly going to be more reform minded, blah, blah, blah. Hear people say that, and then there you've got other people talking about balkanization, how they're going to try to promote that in Iran with all the assortment minorities there. How do you
Well,
respond to those type of
to give
takes?
that its due, right? So, for instance, because of how like Trump world works and access to Trump works, the Americans in pushing this like Pahlavi thing, which is a joke, right? The Pahlavi's not popular. It's a joke, right? They're all and in fact, any kind of like Persian movement, like ethnically Persian movements are just in Iraq, Iran are they're liberals they're like liberals in the kind of Iran. They're not going to form militias, right? Like the cause of liberalism does not cause one to form like American Hezbollah equivalents, right? Like the party of trade. Like we've all read Mises. No one like there's no like Mises is our prophet. We're going to form like a death march and have a martyrdom cult. Like you're not getting some kind of like American aligned militia fighting to the death in like the Persian middle class. It's a joke, right? That said, there are Kurds and Baluchs in Baluchistan. So Baluchistan is the kind of southeastern border Pakistan border region, and Kurdistan is the Iraq border region. These There are forces in these regions that do have beef with the government. They have tried to rebel every once in a while. They're generally contained. There are also Baluchs and Kurds who are patriotic Iranians who view themselves as Iranian first, and their ethnic group second. There's also the Azeris in the northeast who are just basically totally regime aligned, like uh, sorry, not, yeah, I guess Azeri, yeah, Azerbaijani, I guess. They're totally like the late Ayatollah was uh half as Azeri from Azerbaijan, or so there's not conflict there. So there's not a conflict in the northeast. There could be something cooked up in Baluchistan. The CIA and the Mossad have smuggled guns that way before, but I do think they also burned their shot because remember, like a month ago, they tried to do this without a war. They tried to spin up a revolution, and frankly, they got crushed. Right, with 3,000 people died, probably 400 cops or whatever, and 220,000 protesters and civilians. Like they tried this. They had their protesters shooting at the cops. They kind of they brutally mistimed that uprising. Right, like why wouldn't you do it now? Why would you wait for the? Why would you do it a month before the war? Why would you have all of your like discontented revolutionary radicals pop up, start shooting, and then get crushed, and then a month later try to do this war thing, right? Like the 12-day war burned a lot of those assets, and then that burned probably the last of them. I can't imagine there's many Iranians who are anti-regime and radical willing to fight who haven't done it already in the last 9 months. They've had all the chances they want. They're the ones who have done this have gotten like they've gotten burned because the Americans just do this. The Americans did this with Kurds against Saddam in the 90s. Like America will let you rebel and revolt, and then if the calculus changes and they get a peace deal with the person that like you're rebelling against, they'll just leave. So I don't I understand like a balkanization. Like there are lines to balkanize Iran on. I don't see that happening as a result of this conflict. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, one other point is that the Kurdistan in Iraq has a large border with Iran, and and that is a very like zogged up autonomous region of Iraq. Like it's controlled. Literally, the CIA and are all over that place. It's very possible they're getting arms smuggled in to do stuff, but they've had that's been a problem and an ongoing concern and a thing the Iranian security service has been dealing with for since the end of the Iraq, since the beginning of like since the Iraq War, since like even before that with under Saddam, because when like I don't see I don't see balkanization. What was the other part of that question? I forgot.
So yeah, there's like some people who think they're slick and it just and say and try to rationalize Trump's strategy by saying that Trump's targeting of the IRGC specifically is done so that there's nothing but moderates left in like the army or other factions of the Iranian government in the military apparatus that will be more amenable to negotiating with the West. Like, what type of weight do you put on that?
Oh, so there absolutely are factions that want to negotiate more. The problem is this is always the problem with the reformers have in Iran. Reforming people who want to work for the institutions, they have positions in the government, they have this view that they can moderate on these things and gain access to trade and slowly liberalize. The problem the reformers always have is not actually that they're the most popular, I think, in raw numbers faction, right? I think the, just real quick, the three like factions of Iranian politics that are serious, right? So they're like true blue American liberals, right? They're minority. There's like actual like Ba'athist secular nationalists minorities, right? Like there are other tendencies, but the three big ones are like cleric types. You're like friendly religious types. That's
Mhm.
like who are dominant structurally, but there's not too many of them. There's a lot in the society, but like percentage wise, the least. More than that are like what we call the military hardliners, guys who are they are not secularists, but they are soldiers, right? They're not priests. Ahmadinejad is kind of the example of these guys, right? And then there are like the reformers, who are these moderates, right? Moderates, but within the system. They are very popular. They have the inherent problem every time they strike a deal with the Americans, they get screwed because they are big advocates of negotiation. And also, a lot of the clerics also are. There's more reformer clerics. The clerics are kind of split internally between hardliners and reformers. More clerics are reformer than you would imagine. Um, Former presidents have been actually reformer clerics, not actually politicians. Um, Getting into weeds, but so after the JCPOA, right? That was like the reformers' triumph. The Iran deal, the nuclear deal, and then of course Trump is like and just destroys it, and then he starts assassinating Iranian generals, declares massive sanctions based on nothing. He breaks the deal, and that discredits the reformers. And this happens now twice to the same batch of reformers, where the they made a deal with the Americans, or they've been wanting to make a deal. They go to the negotiating table and they get struck. They've now gone back to the negotiating table and they've been struck again. Like I, it's not that you can't like in theory start. You could, I guess, go to the Iranian parliament and kill everyone until they give you a reformer. Sure, and they put that guy in charge. But that reformer is going to have learned from like it's tough to be a reformer when like the Americans are betraying you and then also killing everyone around you. Like a lot of the most what's his is a blank on his name. The JCPOA what was the JCPOA? Rousey? No. Anyway, there was a cleric who was the president, who was a reformer during the JCPOA, the Obama deal, right? He is
Rouhani?
Yes, Rouhani. He actually was a reformer. He becomes a hardliner after being betrayed. Like these guys actually he became a hardliner, and even though he was a moderate in like name or reformer in name, he led the most effective like the expansion of Hezbollah into Syria and Iraq to fight ISIS and into Yemen to defend he became the most effective in terms of like spreading Iranian soft and hard power through these militias, a lot of them throughout the region because he got burned, right? If you burn a reformer, and you don't kill him, he's going to become a hardliner. And Pezeshkian has been burned a lot, and he has been the most of previous Iranian presidents, the most like true to the course reform. Reform might be dead in Iran as a tendency, or like maybe you'll see a kind of a split between like true reformers and like reformed reformers who are maybe more hardline, even if they believe in like free markets, right? Because the other thing that's unpopular with the hardliners is they want a lot of let's call them like social democracy, government controlled industry. There's like true blue economic policy, that's like non-political. Like, is it better to have this factory run by the IRGC or private industry or the government? And a lot of the hardliners kind of fall into a more fascistic mixed economy model, as opposed to the reformers are generally like kind of a more capitalist free market types. So you may see the growth of I'm a free market capitalist, but I want to destroy Israel and we'll never talk to the Americans again. Like that might become a tendency. I'm sure there already is some kind of tendency there, but that will probably become a stronger tendency than these true reformers who want to negotiate. There'll probably be I'm a free market capitalist, but I don't want to negotiate faction coming out of this because I mean, Pezhkin and the reformers have been kind of humiliated. Um, you know,
Yeah.
and not but also humiliated in a way that's dignified. It's like I keep extending my hand and friendship gets left away. There's something admirable to that, but it's not the kind of thing people like electing.
Yeah, hell no. No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Yeah, there's another question here. Yeah, from Ryan GGG. What probabilities do you put on nuclear weapons being used in this conflict?
Um, very low, very low.
Hmm.
Um,
How so?
the you you just don't nuke countries to do it, right? Because you can. Because like the reason we don't deploy nukes. So the reason like so for instance, just to do the history is during the Cold War, right? Angola was like this big shatter belt where the South Africans were fighting the Cubans, and they both had local like the Cubans had the Angolan government, and the South Africans had their own UNITA under Savimbi, who was a his ideology is incomprehensible. Um, free market, socialist, witch burning. But he was not communist, for all his flaws. Even though he was a kind of a socialist sometimes. Anyway, there was always a threat, and the Cubans were always fought because I mentioned as if they would get hit with a tactical nuclear weapon. The South Africans at that time were nuclear power, but the USSR was kind of the implicit nuclear umbrella of every you know leftist aligned government in the world. And they weren't, and they were, the Soviets were not that about, they were arguably, in my opinion, less intervention than the Americans in a lot of ways, but they were not deploying troops to Angola in nearly numbers or ability, mostly just like humanitarian bullshit. But their contribution to the conflict in Angola was, well, the South Africans they can't just nuke them. And I think if America has this kind of unipolarity, they're still the strongest horse militarily. But if they just nuke Tehran or Homs or Isfahan or any of these cities to kind of win, and because the Iranians would, I do think if you nuked a city, the Iranians would negotiate. It'd be silly not to, right? They would probably comply with most of your demands, or damn near all of them. But you would have changed the calculus where now China is forced to become what they don't want to be. China does not want to be the global force for the Marxist proletarian struggle right now. They do in maybe 100 years. It's in the book, but it's not in the current policy. They are not the shields to the proletariat. If you are nuking a city that is Chinese aligned, that is a source for Chinese oil, that is, you know, the Chinese will have no choice but to become the people's like you will. I'm not saying you wouldn't actually win everything you would want in the very short term. I'm saying you would have sparked a true new Cold War. China would be, they would have to view you as like, they would have no choice. Like other countries would do also like that would crack NATO, right? I do think NATO would shatter. I think Spain, Italy, Germany, Japan's not gonna. Japan has a very pro-American government right now, right? I think I think you could see the Japanese government, if like you're just bombing a civilian city, they would have to be pushing out, like kicking out U.S. bases at a certain point, right? Like the outcry, also like the South Koreans are gonna get freaked out, right? Because South Koreans are not nuclear and they are under the nuclear gun of the North Korea. Like there's no way. I don't think you let this happen. The other question is, do the Israelis do it? I don't. I think the Israelis don't do it for the same reason, because the Israelis and the Americans are the same thing. Like people say, oh well, what if the Israelis nuked it and the Americans nuked them and the Americans didn't? I don't think people view them as a separate. Like this is a joint operation. Like you can't fight a war alongside for 3, 4, 8 weeks. Maybe the cracks start to show, and on week 8 you really sling a nuke. You can't say I was only on their side for the first 60 days of that conflict or 90 days of that conflict, and then on 90-91 they launched nuke, and now I want no part of this. Like no, I don't see nuclear as applying here. It's
Yeah.
just not like it's not a card.
Another question here from Pete Budapest. Does Israel actually want the backlash from the killing of the supreme leader, or are they just insanely stupid?
Do they want the backlash? It's a good question. I think they priced it in for sure. But I do they want it? It's a kind of philosophical question, right? Did they just what's the difference between pricing in the cost of an action versus like would you wanting to do it to create kind of feel I think they did I think they did it for all three of the reasons you can think of. Which is what I wanted to do some kind of political change in Iran. I think they do see that as a vector for that. They do know that if like the global Shia population lashes out and like that could have positive effects for them. It does allow them to, do certain things with maybe fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon again, or maybe also closing off the Gaza Strip and just starving the Gazans again. But they could have done all these things without killing the Supreme Leader too. They could just cut off food to Gaza because the war started because they want. I don't know. It's kind of a philosophical question, isn't it? Like I think they saw a number of reasons to do this, and they did it for that reason. I don't. It's hard to say like they did it to induce backlash just by them doing things, because Israel is like the sovereign. They have the Americans behind them. They can do whatever they want. Like what it gave Israeli the freedom to bomb whatever they could in Iran is not that it's not that they killed the supreme leader and then the Iranians reacted. It's that the Americans were doing joint strikes with them, right? Like that's the thing. American backing is more significant than I think the backlash. Now it's meaningful, but I don't think it's like
Yeah.
there's a playbook they run this where they don't kill him either, and it looks almost identical. I think. Like the supreme leader was not saying, "Hey, knock the tar out of Bahrain," right? That there's not even centralized command in that sense anymore. That's a regional commander who's across from Bahrain saying, "Well, I want to destroy Bahrain, and I have the freedom to destroy Bahrain." There's not a Iranian chain of command in that sense that we're like the supreme leader is signing off on targets, right? And he wouldn't have signed off on Bahrain. So I think they took it as like a bonus, but it they could have taken it or leave it. It is. I think it's more important for like internal Iranian politics, and the side benefit I think is it's also something they can kind of give the Americans, because like the question is always like, what does America benefit from all this? Right? We're just doing Israel. This is another war for Israel. Like I have too many of these, right? And I think at a certain point you can say that like I don't believe this, obviously, but like what we gave the Americans was that we killed the Ayatollah. Like Israel has contributed that. Like America doesn't like the Ayatollah. You can cry about the mech and the mistreatment of women and the whatever the whatever thing, oh the hostage crisis or whatever. Okay, like that's it. I think there's an aspect of that. I think, but I think it's also it's more part of the Trump the Dunrow doctrine, right? And also allegedly the Saudis were pushing for this. Now it's rumored. It's currently rumored and like there's leaks. Allegedly the Saudis were saying you should kill the supreme leader. Allegedly. No data is true, but like it's very much in the early stages. But
Yeah, I have a theory on that. too, because I feel like they're trying to find a Shavos Goy scapegoat so that,
Yeah.
that, to throw them under the bus to, hide the fact that this whole operation is just a shit show, so they gotta find somebody to be the fall goy, but, yeah, that's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. No, I know, it's kind of a philosophical my answer to the question is kind of a philosophical question, isn't it? A philosophical question, isn't it? I mean, one Israeli minister in the room could have had one opinion, one might have another one, one analyst could have said this, one, like, the Americans could have said that, Trump could have said that. They also they took him out. There's someone somewhere in there who thought that, oh, there would be a backlash and we could have a freer hand in Lebanon or whatever, or like starve the Gazans more. Also, there are different factions in Israel who are more like psychotic, like, oh, well, this gives us an excuse to bomb Lebanon more and bomb and like cut off Gaza from food. They're like that. There's an aspect of that for sure. Like, internally, it may have been sold to certain factions. You're sold to your kind of Randy Fine, Bezalel Smotrich, Ben Gvir faction as like, oh, we're going to do this to invoke a reaction, so we can, like, the Gulf states are now distracted with this. Now we're going to starve a lot of Gazans to death. Right? That could that. Believe me, but I don't think it's the primary. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, Cheese Sandwich asked this. Do you think world opinion is siding with Iran?
I think it's too early to tell, honestly. I do think that the the UAE specifically has gotten, like, more unpopular as of late, just, like,
Total
socio
Instagram influencer death.
yes, like, so and, like, I don't think it's a weird kind of popular it's a popular tourism destination, people do, like, most people don't like it, right? It is considered a kind of a playground for the rich and the morally suspect. Um, people I think the world does wanna see America get a black eye, always kind of inherently to any kind of thing the Americans involved in. The world wants to see us lose, because of, our behavior and our history abroad. Um, I think I'm gonna have a take on this. It's not quite as optimistic as I would want it to be, but I think there's kind of already been a fracturing along the globe of, do you support Russia and China, or do you support, like, the kind of Ukraine, Europe, America thing? And where you stand on that really does inform this. This is kind of going to be viewed if imagine, like, a neutral country, right? Has no connection to any of this shit, right? Like, what does the average Chilean think of this conflict? He probably thinks whatever he thinks of the Ukraine conflict. He either thinks Russia is good or America, Ukraine is good, right?
You wouldn't know something about Chile. There's a large Palestinian diaspora there
True,
that's,
true. Yeah.
that
But
is actually
I'm
yeah,
starting
yeah.
you bring my thoughts here. I'm going back to the mode person. I'm
Yeah.
saying the mode person's opinions have not shifted out of where they are on the kind of, like, America, Ukraine block versus Russia, Iran, China block. Like, I think where you think in those 2 blocks kind of pre-divides you for this conflict in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, there's some stuff in the chat too that's funny.
Yeah,
We're talking about Sunoids, and
yeah,
yeah, those people are gone. Like they're the equivalent of the low IQ rhinoids because being a goofy ass goyim, that's not just exclusive to Western European domains. It's a international mind virus that has infected all forms of polities that the Hebraic hidden hand has groped. Anyways, yeah, Shango had a good question for you, Lewis, in your assessment. What are the permanent damages this conflict will have on Israel and the United States? Sorry, I just meant Israel, smiley face.
yes. Good. It's hard to say, even how long it goes. I do think that, like, there will have to be a long period of rebuilding, like, assuming you get unconditional ceasefire, I do think the Americans will probably still rebuild those bases in Bahrain and Qatar and, in Kuwait. Um, I think the lasting impact, if and I'm pointing towards, like, I think at some point you'll just see unconditional ceasefire. The lasting impact depends on how the Iranians play it, right? the Iranians could just do kind of status quo stuff. Um, I don't think like Americans are going to lose much of like fighter planes or a meaningful amount of aircraft or boats or whatever, or the Iranians will like destroy the Dimona reactor. I don't think it's going to happen. What I do think is going to happen is one thing like kind of more plus witsy in that if the Iranians do get like the unconditional ceasefire after they kind of get their revenge for what happened to Khomeini or Khomeini, sorry. I think the question is if they get that ceasefire, they have kind of in effect won the right to nuclearize, right? Like they like there is kind of so they have implicitly earned the right to build nuclear weapons if they get a cease if they even get a white peace in this conflict, right? And I think that's meaningful. Like if they get a favorable ceasefire or a general ceasefire, I think the Iranians have earned this the right to make nukes if they want, right? And that then it turns out they want them just internal political, theological debates. But I think that's meaningful if they're saying if the Americans just pull back, then Iran just has won even if they don't exercise it, they've won the right to make nukes, and that's the turn. I think that's my take on that. I don't think it's going to be any boat or ship or plane or even base can be rebuilt even personnel. Frankly, I'm a soldier. I was imminently replaceable. I was the most replaceable, guy. Um, I don't think you're seeing like a shift in like permanently changing assets. Things can be rebuilt. Um, it's just a matter of timelines.
Yeah, let's see here. There's a few more here, and then I've got some other questions that are in the chat. But let me know when you have to leave as well, because if you have
Yeah,
to leave, that's fine. Yeah, let me know when you have your heart out. But
yeah.
there's one from Pete Budapest. He asks, speaking of NATO, what do you make of Israeli officials letting it slip that Turkey is next after Iran?
I think I don't think they're letting it slip. I think they're well, not the Judy not that they're John, but uh, I think it's like just that's like internal saber rattling. They're not attacking Turkey. Turkey is not next. Turkey. They are saying that if we they are telling their people that, like the war is not done. Like they're basically saying we're going to fight forever, right? That's it's just like moralizing. I don't think they're sincerely going to attack Turkey. They're very very silly. There's no reason to. Turkey is their biggest ally. Frankly, like Turkey is
Yeah,
arguably more
yeah,
important than the Americans give like weapons and stuff, but the Americans don't like the Americans weren't fighting in this war. They just gave weapons. It would be enough. Israel would look pretty much the same. If Turkey cut off oil to Israel would be in a lot of trouble. Like Turkey is aligned with Israel in very meaningful, profound ways.
yeah, secret diplomacy and all that. Do you think that basically,
I mean, it's not
like,
even secret anymore. Like
yeah,
the Turkish aligned when in the Armenia Azerbaijan war. The Azerbaijanis who were aligned with Turkey, the Turkic people. They were using Israeli drones. Like they were using like it's open now. I don't think it's even arguably like the oil comes from Turkey and goes to Israel, right? Like it's not secret
yeah,
diplomacy, sure, but it's just diplomacy at a certain point, right?
yeah. Yeah, my opinion on that, yeah, it's like a lot of red meat speech.
Yeah.
Do you think that that is part of, though, their broader supremacy strategy, like structurally, like if Turkey, let's say, post Erdogan Turkey, starts to become more radical, do you think that they may start being more hawkish towards Turkey, Israel?
It's possible, but I think the way you contain Turkey is that you the Americans just control them. Like the Americans have a lot of leverage on Turkey. I think I would be very to business access to also like the Europeans have leverage. A lot of people have a lot of leverage on Turkey, and I think a lot of leverage if they get pushed and fail before you see like Israel saying where they're going to bomb Turkey. I don't see it. Turkey is a large country full of Turks, right? Like it's not, and they also don't seem to have ambitions in that direction. Like the ambitions of Turkey are more about its own security, its own economy, parts of Syria making buffer zones. Like the alignment like the goals of the Israelis are kind of often aligned, where they kind of want the countries around them to be weak or like allies, and that's what they want. Like both countries want Syria to be a weak, right? They don't want a strong Syria. Okay, they work together to achieve that goal. Like I think the country between those is Lebanon, right? Lebanon's already not a strong country, right? Lebanon's not gaining strength anytime soon. So I think, yeah, Lebanon. Like I don't see where they're. I don't see a situation in which things shift seismically in this direction.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Paul asked, "Is there a chance that the U.S. could partially pull out of the region in light of this conflict?"
They already have. They've already pulled out of the Gulf bases. Like you know um they've already pulled out the Gulf bases. They pulled out of some of the Iraq bases before this happened. Now I don't think it's going to stop after this ends. Um, I think the question is, do they go back in? Right? I think there's going to be however this ends, even if it's like an American victory, unless the Americans are literally installing a government in Tehran, it's going to be a strong case that you shouldn't put the Fifth Fleet back at Bahrain. It's too close. Like you should put the Fifth Fleet in, I don't know, Oman or anyway, somewhere not there. It's like, I mean, you could spit and hit Bahrain from Iran. Like it's too close. Like you call that now, is that a regional pullout? No, but also no, I don't think we would. I could see a kind of reorientation into like Jordan, getting a little further away, getting a little more breathing space between us and Iran. But I don't think we're leaving that region by any means. Maybe deeper into Saudi. A lot of the new American bases have actually been increasingly deeper into Saudi, like more west, more in the desert.
Mm,
I think that trend continues. Not a pullback, much as a shift, if you will. Kind of a
yeah.
because the old used to be, oh, we got to get as close to the, well, it's easier to live in the Arabian Peninsula on the coast, right? There's water, right? There's lakes, there's cities, right? There's people. Obviously, the further in the desert you go, the shittier it is. And also, the theory was, oh, you want to be close to Iran so you can go strike them. Well, now it's then they can strike you. The times changed in 1981. So I think you might see people advocating, whether it would happen or not. There will be a faction advocating like a shift westward, relatively.
Mm. What would you say would cause like the U.S. to just completely leave the Middle East? What type of variables would have to come into play?
I mean, Israel would have to stop existing. Uh, yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
the full American foreign policy. Like, is what it is.
and Paul asks here, what are the odds this Iranian conflict shortens the war in Ukraine?
Not as high as you would think, because the only thing that's going that would go to the Ukrainians would be Patriot missiles. But the Ukrainians have been like they run out every couple of weeks. They get a few more. Like they're already rationing them at the most. They're firing a few a night. Like it's not. I actually I don't think this has any effect on the war.
Hmm,
Not perceptible.
see. All right. Okay, we're now gonna go to some of the chat questions that were asked before the show, and I'll offer my take, and then I'll let you
Sure.
sound off.
I do
'Cause
have. I have till 9, so or not 9, so I have 8 more minutes. So
okay, yeah, that's fine. Scrooge McBean asks, "Do the border tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan have broader implications in the Judeo-American conflict with Iran?" For me, it just looks like a class. From what I've seen, it looks like a classic border clash because of like the ethnic makeup of the two countries with the whole like Pashtuns and whatnot. However, I always do see these conflicts that take place between two Eurasian powers. It does kind of benefit indirectly the Judeo-American Empire in the kind of divided rule sense because if they turn into like a prolonged affair, like structurally speaking, it just means less aid that Pakistan and even Afghanistan could provide Iran in a potential like conflagration. And as we talked about before, Pakistan does have a really transactional and hedging type strategy. And whenever Imran Khan was in power, he was kind of aligning himself a lot more with BRICS. He took a very neutral stance actually to the Russo-Ukrainian war, which angered the Pakistani military establishment there. And I am convinced that he was kind of color revolutioned in that impeachment proceeding he went through, and now he's jailed. But yeah, what's your take on that flare
It's
up
the
between
same.
Afghan?
It's a border conflict. It's not.
Yeah,
It's a border war. Both countries are like Iranian allies or declared themselves Iranian allies, which is very funny in this conflict. They're still shooting at each other. It's a border conflict. It's not serious. I truly like the more you learn about the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, the it applies in no way. Like it will not inform you in anything. It's a the British messed up with a line on a map, and the Afghanistan and Pakistan will fight over it forever and ever.
yeah,
I don't know what to tell you.
yeah. All right. There is one question that CJ Miller asked here. Just to follow up on my question from last week about the cartel violence in Jalisco, Mexico. Seems like the cartel riot has died down now, but in the aftermath, I'm still wondering if there's any U.S. Israeli angle to the assassination of El Mencho. I'm sure they pick winners in the cartel wars based on who will play ball with U.S. intelligence and or Israeli crime families. Um, Not so sure about the El Mencho case because I saw something, a report a few years ago on Insight Crime, for example, where there was an interview with a guy that claims that the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación that El Mencho headed up, has received like Israeli armaments before. There have been like Israeli criminals and mercenaries that would train these people on occasion, but my vague impression of that hit on him is that I think they're probably scared that this new generation cartel in Jalisco has gotten too powerful. And they like this balance of power type of strategy where they'll just take out some guy, so like one of these cartel heads, and then let the cartel splinter so they can be more easily like controlled. They do like the US does have like that kind of strategy of backing the moderate rebels, but in this case, backing the moderate cartels that will play ball. In terms of Israeli involvement, from what I've read, the Beltran Leyva cartel has a lot more of that involvement there, with not just like Israeli arms. There's like Israeli nationals that have been involved in that. I think Los Zetas, whenever in their gestational stage, when the Mexican special
Yeah.
forces were being trained in Fort Bragg. This is before Los Zetas was formed. Seth Harp reports that they were actually trained by Israelis as well. They received a lot of training there, and then they formed Los Zetas. But I'm not as big of a Mexico expert. I may bring on one
Yeah.
person, a friend
Well,
of mine.
I have one real quick point on that on the train because a lot has been made of the cartels were trained by the Green Berets, and it's true, but like all those guys are ancient or dead. There's a perception I think among that the cartels are like a military force. People kind of conflate like FARC. FARC in Colombia is a military, right? They have platoons and squads and machine guns and organization. The cartels are criminals. They're not even a militia. Like at the best, maybe they can fight local cops to some degree, but when it becomes the cartels actually have law. There have been a lot of conventional conflicts with cartels in the last 10 years. The Mexican government has won them all very very quickly. The Mexican Marines show up and the cartels go away because they're not a military. They're not like FARC. FARC is a kind of military cartel. There's only one of those. They're not making more of those. It's a very unique kind of situation that came up in. I think people really overstate the competence of the cartels
Yeah,
in like open warfare.
yeah. I blame those that whole universe, the special ops intelligence bro
Mhm.
cinematic universe on YouTube for really creating that perception. That's something that's
Yeah.
really gotten people's minds polluted on the cartel thing. Because I have a friend that I may bring on to the show for more of like a free show to who's lived in Mexico now for well over a decade and knows kind of the score and says like a lot of this stuff you see here is just like slop.
Oh no, I mean, frankly, the socialist government. did a very that's how I would do it. I was a socialist government. The campaign, go, we're stop on criminals and do all that about this shit. And then when they came in, they just kept crushing the cartels. They just kept everything. Like the government has not been solved in Mexico in the last. They've been they do like, oh, we got to reform. Prison is bad, but like they didn't abolish prisons. They're still
Yeah.
fighting them. They're still doing raids. They're still taking out guys. I don't see the cartel. The cartels are not a military. They are criminals, right? They're a mafia. They are scary because they are individually violent to you if you're in range of them. If you got, you know, 15 guys in rifles and body armor, they're not gonna fight you because they're criminals, you know?
Yeah. One other question by CJ Miller. This was kind of answered before, but he does have an interesting angle here. He said Yoav Galant has already stated that after the Islamic Republic falls, Israel will pivot to face Turkey and what he called its growing Sunni axis as his number one enemy. There's much to say about this. First of all, of course, it's overlooking Iran, which is by no means out of the fight yet. Second, it's a bit strange to forecast your next opponent on the first day of a new hot war when you haven't won yet. Third, it gives Turkey a warning. Fourth, Turkey has largely played ball with U.S., Israel for the most part, despite occasional Islamist signaling on Erdogan's part that is basically just rhetoric. Turkey has been an expert at playing both all sides over the last decades and manages to build up significant economic, military, and proxy power. Does Galant and others' belligerent rhetoric towards Turkey indicate that Israel just wants to remove all potential rivals from the region so they could be the undisputed hegemon? Or is this just typical Jewish bloodlust going into overdrive now that they're bombing Iran? Will it be all talk, or will Turkey and the Muslim Brotherhood really try to oppose Zog in some meaningful way? Well, Lewis answered this, and yeah, to reiterate the point that Turkey plays ball with Israel all the time. So this is just rhetoric, and you
I
just have
do
to
also
look at the
think
action.
I forgot the context of that was yeah. The context was he had a very Sunni axis. He's
Yeah.
kind of making a reference to, not it's there's a faction in Syria that just popped up of, in Jelani's army. They're called, like, the whatever there's a million of these factions, like, whatever Unity or something of Unity.
Mm.
They are basically they are factions that were formerly Jelani aligned that are they want to go get the Golan Heights back, and they wanna go fight Israel. I don't think they have the numbers to do that yet, but there is a faction in, like, the new Turkish aligned Syria that does want that to go happen. And I don't think Jelani could or would stop them. They could become like kind of a Hezbollah in Syria where they just pop shots at the Golan Heights periodically as like a terrorist group. And the Syrian government doesn't know anything about it. That might be like what he's referencing, not necessarily like, you know, bombing Istanbul.
Yeah. What about? I want the only interesting angle of this question is: do you think the Muslim Brotherhood will try to oppose Zog in any type of meaningful way?
It's not really, I mean, Muslim Brotherhood is already trying. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood tries inherently what they do, but like not really. It's kind of an old school question, right? Like the Muslim Brotherhood the Muslim in Hamas, yes, Muslim Brotherhood has created a lot. Muslim Brotherhood in every country has kind of become its own thing. There's not really a commonality of the Brotherhood anymore.
Yeah.
In Egypt, they are just being oppressed heavily by dictatorship. In in Palestine, they become Hamas, right? In um, Turkey, they are so. Oh, in I guess they're kind of like they've kind of replaced by like the Wahhabists and Jelani kind of replaced that tendency in Syria. In Turkey, the ruling class with political scholars, if you're studying Turkish politics, the scholars just call it like political Islam because the party kept getting banned so many times every but it's the current party. I forgot what they're actually called these days. Um, they they're not a they brotherhood-ish, but like they've split. Like there's not a common Muslim brotherhood anymore. I'm sort of sad to say. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think of it as a unified force. Like countries, it's more. It would be silly to talk about what's happening in Gaza in context of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? You did Hamas, right? That's the meaningful group there. That makes sense. And the
Yeah.
same thing in Egypt. Like you wouldn't talk about like some kind of axis between how Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt being oppressed by the American regime, or they're not. I mean, it'd be nice if people could work together, but they're they have their own problems. Same thing in Pakistan. The Brotherhood in Pakistan and in Bangladesh, like they're there, but they're not. working in concert in any meaningful way. And kind of never were in a lot of ways too.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, those type of Sunoid groups, they've been just Finkelfinked in their own right, and I get the impression
Y
too, there's
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of
the Brotherhood is like kind of like the bath. They're kind of the bath party. They're like very old school, right? Like, but the Brotherhood's not. It's like now it's all about like Salafism and Wahhabi. If you want to be a crazy psycho, you go be a like the Brotherhood actually had a lot good going for it socially. The current
yeah,
one, what's popular now with this for like your young radical is very yeah. At core charity group for feeding starving kids, and like YMCA's and stuff equivalent to. Wasn't it became this thing inherently so being oppressed by Baptists, right?
yeah.
They don't bother with the pretense, you know, the whole YMCA works probably for all of us. I do have to roll. It is
Okay, yeah.
that time.
Alright. No, no, thank you, man, you did great, and I always enjoy your perspectives and on these matters. Before you leave, let the audience know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Lewis Word Genius. You can find my co-host Doomernat at Doomernat22. There's an RSS feed for his for our podcast together called Eviction Notice, and also check him out. He actually just did a show on with Jake Shields about the Iran Israel conflict, and I've heard it's actually recorded like an hour before this. So go check
Yeah,
that
I
out too.
saw I saw that.
Jake Shields with Doomernat.
I'm linking to y'all's stuff in the chat so that people can check it out because they drop dope
Yeah.
content and it's very high IQ stuff.
Yeah,
So
he's given a good. I like it when he talks to Jake Shields' audience though, because he gives it a very good like because he does not to say water it down, but he does like break it down simple style, right? When I come with you, I'm being a little more like I'm using acronyms and I'm talking
yeah,
about internecine stuff. When Jimnat's doing that, it's for the people, This is for you, Jose. I know the average Jose sub is a little bit higher tier, so a little more
yeah.
jargon, a little
We have a
more
different yeah. We
more advanced.
definitely have different audience, man. Well, I'll let you go, man. Thank you.
All right, thank you. See you.
Let's see. Yeah, there's another question here by Paul Scribner. He asked, question for tonight. Tucker Carlson and others with U.S. government backgrounds have said boldly that Israel is holding the U.S. hostage with potential use of its illegally acquired nuclear arsenal in the event Israel feels existentially threatened. If Israel uses nukes, what do you think the U.S. and the world response will be? Medvedev stated during the last conflict that Russia would supply Iran with warheads if the Israelis went nuclear. Could Iran also have a functional warhead without West knowing about it? Based on other regimes in the world, the only safe way to protect from other Western interventions is to have nuclear capacity for war. At this point in time, the only way for Iran to maintain sovereignty is to develop a nuclear arsenal ASAP. Yeah, so I'm pretty much on record on this is that like the Iran's strategic patience doctrine and not getting nukes is one of the biggest errors it's made because when you don't have a nuke, you become a geopolitical plaything and you get salami sliced to death. Just look at Libya, Syria, Iraq, and look at the contrast of North Korea. You've got nukes, you get respect. Doing this cucked ass diplomacy and playing by the rules in this so-called rules-based order, which really should be just called the Jews-based order. Stupid stuff and engaging in stupid behavior at this type of level will get your ass killed. And that's why I chew out rightoids and other people in this movement that should know better because like your behavior, it'll snowball into stuff that it's gonna get you and potentially other people killed. Cause like you gotta get this shit sorted out. You can't be getting in the boxing ring and learning haymakers from the start. You gotta get the footwork down and learn how to jab. And these people, like even in Iran, they've got their own cucks and other infiltrated people that should know better. Um, if Israel like use nukes, I mean, I actually agree with like Lewis's take about that. Like they're probably not gonna use nukes just yet, um, because there's no real existential threat at the moment that Iran could pose. I think they could probably fuck up Israel pretty badly, but it's more likely that they let these missile barrages go against Israel, that it could create a catalyst of political effects in Israel that could lead to greater destabilization over the long term. Because honestly, after October 7th, one political loss that it's clearly had, it's no longer the safest place for Jewish people to be at, because they're going to be constantly barraged by Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthi, and Iranian rockets, so they're not safe. They're actually Jews are safer in the Western Hemisphere, the Anglosphere in general, just basking in the sun, like in South Florida and stuff like that, because, like, yeah, you're just not going to be constantly sheltering due to hordes of missiles from the Axis of Resistance and all of that. And that's been one effect from that. As far as like Dmitry Medvedev, I mean, that guy's just a shit poster, man. He's just on Twitter talking smack. He's the bad cop in the Russian government, but I don't think Russia's going to go that far. They're pretty adamant about not really promoting nuclear proliferation and following the rules. That's one of my critiques of Russia, is I think they sometimes try to play too much with the rules-based order, but they generally have been good at not signing any new ceasefires with the US and stuff like that, and they're chugging along on the battlefield in Ukraine. But I do agree, Paul, with your general assessment that countries without nukes, man, they're just there to get fucked by the Judeo-American axis, because the Judeo-American axis respects power. They don't respect good deeds. They just respect you, like the ability that you could potentially incinerate them en masse, or at least give them a bloody nose. And Iran should not be like, if I were like a decision maker in Iran, they should not be letting up anytime soon. And they should only agree to a ceasefire until they've thoroughly skull fucked Israel's infrastructure and all of that. But yeah, nukes are a good thing. They're what ensure peace. I am no peacenik or an anti-nuclear type whatsoever. I am a firm believer in realpolitik at all levels, whether it's geopolitics, domestic politics, and whatnot. Oh, crazy things to ask this in the chat, because all the stream stuff has been covered here. If Trump tried to nationalize the midterm elections like he's mused, would the soldiers go along? To be honest, no. But here's the thing, they'll let Democrats win. And here's where the rug pull comes. This gives Trump the excuse to do like an immigration type of reform, aka amnesty, or like a constructive Republican alternative proposal to amnesty, aka crap, to just expand immigration. I think like that's how the system goes, where Republicans will fucking throw the midterms this go around so that they can like not do anything on immigration at best, or at worst cut a deal with Democrats when they have like a split House and split Senate to expand legal or some type of immigration avenue. I think a lot of that's bluster. Trump is only serious about shit is whenever it deals with like Israel or upholding like Jewish rights. But the system is fine, honestly, with division of powers, because it, first off, it creates gridlock, which means when there's gridlock, no legislation that benefit Gentiles will be passed. But you know what's funny, and this is why this is not a bug, but it's actually a feature. The only stuff that does get passed is anything that deals with Israel, just broader Jewry, because they're the only sovereign there. And all those representatives that don't do jack shit, they will do stuff for Jewry, because they've already the Jewish supremacist power configuration has played this multi-decade game to ensure that no matter what type of political constellation you have, whether it's a Republican trifecta, Democrat trifecta, a Republican with like a split House and Senate, or vice versa, the House always wins. So I don't think there all this talk about Trump nationalizing the elections, or Trump, what's it called, starting starting a dictatorship and stuff like that, strikes me more as a kind of libtard resistance liberal fantasy. I think the he's already done a pretty good job for organized Jewry, and they'll just go along with the facade. But I mean, the time is ticking, because Anti-Semitism is obviously on the rise and all of that after October 7th. And this stuff is just going to be just crammed through. The geopolitical stuff is going to be crammed through in the next year because after the midterms, I think you're going to see more domestic stuff happen. 2026 looks like it's more of a geopolitics year. But in terms of like the midterms, after the midterms, what I think is going to happen after the midterms, though, you're going to see a purge of the so-called dissident right and the geniuses that thought they were on some real politique stuff by thinking that they could like get in bed with Jewry and try to trick them. Those motherfuckers are gonna get just bent over and fucked like dirty hookers once that's done because they're no longer useful. The people the assets that are gonna get their butts taken and disposed like a used condom. It's gonna be the rightoids, the fall guys, and then Trump is probably gonna be fine. Honestly, where he might get in trouble is very likely gonna be after his presidency. They might just go hands on there, or he's just gonna just fly off to Israel or whatever philo-Semitic sanctuary there is, like Argentina or whatever. But I think I don't agree with the argument. With some people are saying that he might step down. Well, if he does step down because he is getting old as fuck, I could see him for health reasons, but I don't think it's gonna be because of like the political class's machinations against him. They're generally down with the agenda and it's gonna happen right now this year, as we're gonna see all the Iran stuff be just crammed in because after the midterms, you're gonna see more domestic stuff happening there. Yeah, I don't see him stepping down it by the end of the year. But I don't think it's a ridiculous I don't think it's a ridiculous form of speculation because the US is reaching a very structurally unstable um point in its history where there's so many things happening both domestically as a country is just becoming less white and it's also just becoming more retarded and also the world is no longer unipolar where things are just going to become more unstable in general and you're going to see a lot more like retarded forms of governance and just some of like the rankest forms of banana republic style plundering and just court intrigue. But Trump um is gonna be more or less fine, I think, if you're talking about his political future. He's also probably gonna still be a kingmaker there too, because it's just gonna become just dumber. And yeah, also crazy things. Yeah, you're right. The the less white and just more retarded the society is, it's just gonna be easier to control because it's just divide and rule extrapolated like at on all fronts, whether it's the politics, gender shit, culture. It prevents any form of coherent opposition block, whether it's like racial, political, whatever, to form the challenge jury. The more conflict dyads there are, the better it is for them. But this is where we have to hunker down and play this multi-generational game of opposition to Jewry, and the first step to do that is to stop. It's just to stop trying to use failed methods and completely discard all the Judeo-American political currents that have emerged since the end of World War II, like conservatism, libertarianism, paleoconservatism, all that nonsense. That shit has failed. It's time for new strategies to take hold. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I have for tonight, y'all. Great discussion despite some of the fucking technical hiccups, but it happens to the best of us. But good questions to each and every for that each and every one of y'all put forward. And Lewis did a great job trying to break this stuff down. He's always good. People at the right stuff always come on point. Right stuff, War Strike, and the Property and Freedom Society that Marcel Goutreau organizes. are where it's at in terms of the political discourse. Only people that actually get the big picture issues of our time. Anyways, with that, this episode of El Nino Speaks is wrapped up, and El Nino has spoken.